Hi everyone, and welcome to Software 2's Summit 20. As you may know, my name is Keegan Moodley. I'm the UK account manager over at Software 2. And today's workshop is going to be run by our very own Phil Davis and Umays Khan, who are both packaging consultants at Software 2. In this workshop, Phil and Umays are going to provide us a series of tips regarding the hardware and software required to set up an effective packaging environment. Today's workshop, as with all the other workshops, are being recorded, so you can have access to those if you wish. And can I ask that any questions be put in the questions field of your GoToWebinar window, and if we have enough time at the end, we will try to get them to them. If we don't have any time at the end, we'll follow up with these at a later date. So I'm going to hand over to Phil Davis, who will be able to share his screen and take it away.
Okay. Hi guys, and welcome to this webinar about creating and configuring a packaging environment. We decided on doing this webinar on the packaging environment. We've got a lot of new customers at the moment, and I think one or two of them may be struggling with how to set up the packaging machines and how to get started. So we thought this might be quite a good time to put this on for people. So let's get down to it. Right, so the thing I'm going to be talking about, as Keegan mentioned, the hardware requirements that we sort of recommend for a packaging machine. That's the host machine, that's the physical box that you're going to run VMs on. We're going to talk about why we use VMs a little bit, and the various different VM platforms that are out there. I'm going to mention Microsoft Visual C++ redistributables, sort of a bit of a hot topic at the minute. There's some things that you guys need to be aware of with them, and some issues that and workarounds that we've got in place for them. I'm going to hand over to Mays to talk about his Software 2 packaging tool that he created and all the features that are in that. And then I'm going to do the main part of this webinar, which is the packaging environment setup demo. And I'm going to be using VirtualBox and a sort of pre-configured Microsoft VM that they make available to their development VMs that you can download and use for free. And I'll show you where you get those from, and then hopefully, if there's still time, I'm going to take you through the packaging process. So how we go about packaging an app from start to finish if we've never seen the app before. So the development steps that we go through. Right, so moving on to the hardware. So most of you guys have already got your hardware set up, but things that we recommend are a decent processor. So the best you can get for the money. I'd probably start off with an i5 as a minimum sort of spec. If you can get an i7 or even an i9, I think that i9s are available now, then by all means. Obviously, the faster the processor, the better the processor, the quicker things are going to install and be captured, and the faster things will cloudify. I think slightly more important maybe is having a lot of RAM. It allows you to run multiple VMs, so while you're packaging one thing, you'll be packaging another thing at the same time. Or what's more important is that you can have your packaging VM and a test VM both running at the same time. Normally, I think on our forums, we recommend a minimum of 8 GB of RAM. I'd probably say you're close to 16 GB of RAM minimum, really. in order to do that, especially if you've got 4 gig assigned to each VM. If you've got 4 gig assigned to each VM, you're not going to open 2 VMs on an 8 gig machine. SSDs are preferable. I'd actually take that a step further and say SSDs are more likely essential, really. You're writing to a disk all the time when you're packaging, whether you're capturing or cloudifying. So having those quicker write speeds and everything is critical. I'd prefer to have 2 large SSDs in my machine, preferably at least 1 terabyte each. If you can keep your host OS on one disk and your VMs on another SSD, that's even better. And more important, well, not more important, but equally as importantly, is storage, to have a space to take multiple snapshots. They take up quite a lot of space, or they can do, especially if you're keeping them around for a while. So having the storage area to be able to take multiple snapshots and have lots of installers around, and it is crucial, really. Graphics card wise, not so important as such. VMs are limited with the graphical capabilities anyway. If you come across an app that needs a decent graphic card, most of the time they won't work in a VM environment anyway, so you have to sort of make do and try, and maybe you'll need to borrow a lab machine to physically package that on. It's a bit of a pain, I know, but that's just how it is. You have to clean it up as best as you can before you start packaging. But that brings me to why we use VMs in the first place. Because they're independent of the host machine, they're clean. Should have nothing running on your packaging VM. Should be no Windows Defender running on there or anything else. It should just be Windows and the Cloud Paging Studio, really. Certainly shouldn't be any C++ redistributables on there, which I'll talk about next. It should just be a clean environment. Your host machine can be your normal work machine, but your packaging machine needs to be clean, so it's best to do it inside a VM. Again, it's easy to reset to a clean state. You don't want to be using system restore to move it to a clean state. I don't find system restore to be 100% reliable. It's more of an emergency, let's get the machine back up and running thing, the system restore. So it's not really for restoring a machine to a clean state, and it takes too long as well. And the ability to take snapshots. So you take a master snapshot at the start while the machine's clean, you load that snapshot up, you perform your capture, you package the application, you cloudify it, you've got your app set, then you can then reset your machine back to that clean state by reverting back to that master snapshot. The ability to take snapshots through the process of packaging the machine is also important. Like when you package an application, once you capture the install of the main application, best practice would be to take a snapshot at that point before you made any changes. That way, if there's any issues down the line, you haven't got to go back and reinstall the application. I'm thinking about big apps like SolidWorks and the Autodesk apps, which take a couple of hours to install. Maybe if you've got a snapshot with it just installed, then you're in a good position. You haven't got to bother doing that bit again. Okay. So let's talk about these Microsoft Visual C++ redistributables. So they're used by many applications. Some of the free stuff that you get probably might not use them, but certainly the bigger apps do, and they use them in earnest. Things like SolidWorks and Autodesk apps, which I keep mentioning, they use about 10 or 12 of these Visual C++ redistributables. Most of the time you need to have the exact versions must be captured. So if it needs 2012 and the specific version, it'll need that specific version. So we recommend firstly that you try package them at layer 4. The reason for that is because if you leave them at layer 3 and you package them at layer 3, there's a chance that they will clash with any physically installed versions on the target machines. So if you package again, I don't know, Autodesk with all the C++ that's in it, so there's 10 or 12 different versions, and you leave them at layer 3, and then you virtualize it onto a machine that's already got some of those C++ redistributables on, there's a chance that they'll clash with each other. And what you get is you'll get an error message saying MSSCVR71.dll is missing from the machine. Please contact an administrator. In actual fact, that C++ is not missing from the machine. It exists both on the machine and in your app set, but they're sort of cancelling each other out. Now, if you put them at layer 4, that doesn't happen. So that's the best way to deal with C++. Now, unfortunately, some applications need those C++ not to be at layer 4. Things like SQL, like the full versions of SQL, need the C++ to be physically on the machine. And if that's the case, then you need to use an app event to physically put those C++ down. I mean, you could leave them at layer 3 and they'd work at layer 3. The trouble is, again, is that they could clash with any that are already on the machine. So the best way to deal with that, and the way that Messon recommends that you deal with them, is that you install them using a custom app event or configurable app event. So you include the installers for those C++ in your app set, and then you use an after virtualization app event to physically install those on the target machines. Now, on your going back to your packaging machine, if you've already got C++ redistributables on your packaging VM, then obviously if they're already there, there won't be included any captures of any application that need those C++ redistributables. So if they're on there, they'll be missing from the final app set. So when you virtualize it on the machine that hasn't got those C++ already on those machines, your app set's not going to work. So it's important not to have any C++ redistributables on your packaging machine. Now, if you have got them, unfortunately, you cannot uninstall them. I know there are installers for these C++ redistributables, but remnants get left behind. There's certain files and registry keys that get left behind, which means that when you capture an application that has that C++ in it, it doesn't capture all of the files and registry keys that get put down. So unfortunately, the only way to deal with it is to rebuild your packaging machine from scratch, which is not ideal, but that's how it is. Right then, let's talk about some of the VM platforms that are available. This obviously is not an exhaustive list. There's more around than just these 3, but these are the 3 common ones that we've come up against. There's Oracle VirtualBox, VMware Workstation, and Hyper-V. Hyper-V is obviously Microsoft's own product. It's built into Windows Server, I think from, I don't know, I think it's 2012. I'm not sure, not 100% sure, but it's there. All of you guys will already have it or potentially have it. You might not use it, but it's there. It is highly configurable, and it's got a PowerShell interface and management. Personally, it's not my favorite VM to use. I find it a bit painful, but if that's what you guys use, you can use it. That's not an issue. I'm not here to criticize any of these products. VMware Workstation, however, there is something that needs mentioning. The VMware tools that gets installed in the VM environment that allows things like copy and paste between the VM and the host machine, and between VMs, and also shared folders, and the ability to resize the screen automatically to auto scale it, sort of thing. those VMware tools installs 2 Microsoft Visual C++ redistributables, which, as I've already said, is a bit of a no-no on your packaging machine. Now, that's not to say it's the end of the world. It's just that you need to make sure that all the machines that use that are going to be using AppsAnywhere already have those Microsoft Visual C++ redistributables installed. Now, that might be through SCCM, through group policy, or you might build those C++ into your image, your desktop image. However, for BYOD and possibly students' personal machines, you'll need to make sure that they get installed on there. You could have like a prereq package in your App Store that physically installs those C++ redistributables, which students can click on and they sign up to use your App Store, and that will automatically download and install those C++. But they need to be on those machines in order for them to work, because any apps that use those C++ redistributables won't have them contained in the app set if you use the VMware tools. So that's something to be aware of. VirtualBox, the guest editions, which is the equivalent of the VMware tools for VMware Workstation. So in VirtualBox, it uses guest editions. That doesn't install any C++ redistributables. So that's, yeah, you don't have to worry about it with VirtualBox. So that's all I'm going to say on the VM platforms. And at that point, I'm going to move on to the Software 2 packaging tool and hand over to my colleague, Umays, who created it.
Hi there, guys. So thanks for that, Phil. So after you've finished installing your operating system, it's recommended that you actually put down some additional configuration before beginning the process of actually packaging on the system. We do have an article available on the knowledge base if you'd like to manually run through this configuration process, or alternatively, you can use the packaging tool. The actual manual configuration of the operating system can take up to 2 hours or more in some cases. Now, you're probably wondering, what is this configuration that I keep going on about? So essentially, if you was to package an application just after installing Windows 10, for example, even though it may seem like it's a clean setup to you and I, there's actually a number of processes that are running in the background, which will actually get picked up by the Cloud Paging Studio as noise. And noise is essentially anything that is not part of the target application that we're attempting to package. And the less there is of it, the better it is, both for when it comes to cleaning the app set and for debugging if and when something goes wrong. So as I mentioned earlier, manually cleaning and configuring an operating system can take quite some time. The main reason for this is due to the fact that all the options and settings that you need to put down are all located in one place. So for example, if we were to, let's say, disable Windows Defender, you'd actually have to carry out a number of steps just to disable one thing, for example. So you'd actually have to apply a set number of settings, a certain number of settings through the graphical user menu. You'd also have to make some changes in the registry. And on top of this, you'd also have to disable a number of tasks via Task Scheduler. So with all this taken into consideration, I actually came up with the Software 2 packaging tool, which takes out the hassle of manually configuring an operating system for packaging and places all the options in a nice, neat little package. So right, let's go have a look at this tool now. So when you first launch the packaging tool, keep in mind you do have to run it as admin, as a lot of the features and settings on here do actually require administrative rights in order to actually be, to actually go down on your system. So the first tab that you bought to is the environmental preparation tab. On here, you've got a bunch of options that you can actually set on your system, so you can pick and choose what you want, what you don't want. There's also a little question mark icon, a button, should I say, on the right side. If you click this, it'll actually take you to the documentation, which is on the knowledge base again. and this gives you an in-depth guide on or like a run through of what each of these options are doing to your system in the background. So let's just go back to the screen, Phil. Cool. So Software 2 actually recommends that you put down all of these options, and the best way to do this would be to click Select All. But we would recommend not selecting the Disable UAC option for now. This is due to the fact that most cases with most app sets that you actually package won't actually require UAC to be disabled. It's only in couple of app sets that actually require this. For example, if you were to create a secondary capture of Firefox, sometimes you'll get it where Studio just refuses to capture it. In that sort of scenario, you would need to disable UAC. So in general, we recommend leaving that option unchecked. In the future version of the packaging tool, that won't no longer be checked automatically by the select all options. But for now, obviously, you just have to manually deselect it. So after you've done with that, you just click Apply Changes, accept the little dialog box, and all the options will be put down in your system. So right now, we won't actually be doing that, as Phil will later on demonstrate this working in the live demo. So for now, let's move on to the next tab, which is the regedit favorites. Now, this is just a small list of useful favorites or shortcuts, whatever you want to call them, that you can actually add into the registry editor. So by default, you won't actually have any favorites there. So could you just show that, Phil? Yeah. As you can see, we've got nothing there. So these shortcuts that can be applied via this tab are just useful locations that you will be accessing on a regular basis for when packaging and configuring AppsAnywhere. So like, for example, if you wanted to add locally deployed apps through AppsAnywhere, you'd need those install keys. So it just makes life easier. It prevents you from having to go through and manually search for these locations. So if we just go ahead and add this, so you just click Add Favorites, yes, and these will now show up in the Favorites menu. So obviously you can just click away at your heart's content and get to different registry keys and hives a lot quicker. Right, so just let you do that. Last but not least, we've got the Extended Permissions tab. So again, we do have a knowledge base article for this. If you do want to manually apply these to your system, you can do by all means, or alternatively, you can just use the packaging tool. So again, to apply these to your system, simply select the options that you require to put, select the keys that you require through the left-hand menu. Then you can toggle the state of each of these registry keys through the drop-down menus on the left there, as Phil's demonstrating, on the right. And once you're happy with the settings, just simply apply extended permissions and it should all be done for you. Now keep in mind, you only need to apply extended permissions to your player machine. This will not be required on the packaging machine, or you should only use the environmental preparation tab for the packaging machine and the regedit favorites, but that can be applied to both. So extended permissions should only be applied on your player machine for testing purposes. If you are installing the Cloud Paging Player via AppsAnywhere, these keys will automatically be put down via the AppsAnywhere client. And yeah, that's about it from me. I'll be handing it back over to my colleague Phil, and he'll be running through the live demonstration now. Thank you.
Okay, so let's just get my screen back. Right, so thanks, Umaze. As you can see, the Software 2 packaging tool is quite useful. So now I'm going to be running through the packaging environment demonstration. Now we have got an article on this which goes through it in detail here. It's a new article that I've written. A new article showed you one day ago. Look. And it's also got a link to this quick setup guide, which is basically what I'm going to be going through as part of this. So let's bring over my machine. So I'm actually going to be showing you how to set up a packaging machine from scratch. I'm going to install VirtualBox, and then I'm going to import a Microsoft VM, and then I'm going to configure it ready for packaging. So I've downloaded Oracle VirtualBox from the VirtualBox website, and I've saved it to my desktop. I've also downloaded already because a VM. These are the Microsoft Edge developer VMs that that you can use. They've got them for various different platforms: VirtualBox, Hyper-V, VMware. There's a Parallels version as well, which obviously isn't much use to us at the minute. But and something called Vagrant, which I've never heard of. Maybe you have. I don't know. They do expire after 90 days, but I think you can license them if you've got a spare license key, or it might, even if you connect it to your sort of domain, I think it might just license itself. I'm not sure. There is a default username and password. I think it's IE user is the username, and the password is password capital P ASSW 0RD exclamation mark. Obviously, we'd recommend that you change the passwords, but I'm not going to show you to that. You all know how to do that anyway. But this VirtualBox VM that you can download, it's about 7 gig in size, so that takes a little while. So I have already downloaded. So right then, here I'm actually going to install VirtualBox in a VM because I've already got it on my main machine, obviously. Just very quickly install VirtualBox, really simple. It's just a next setup. You have got some options here. I'd make sure the register file associations is checked. Just click next, click all the default stuff, and it installs really quickly. Yes, you want to always trust software from Oracle. Make sure that's checked. And I don't want it to start up straight away. I'll finish. There we go. VirtualBox is now installed. So this Microsoft VM, that's what it comes at. It's zipped up, so you just need to unzip it. Here it is unzipped, which I've already done because it takes a while to unzip 7 gig. And this is it. This is what we've got from Microsoft. This MS Edge win10.ova file. I double click the OVA file, it automatically opens VirtualBox, and it automatically opens the import virtual appliance wizard. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to give it a more accurate name. So I'm going to call it Windows 10 64-bit packaging machine. It's very straightforward. That's exactly what it is. I'm going to increase the CPUs to 2 or 2 cores. I think it is actually not 2 CPUs. I'm not sure. 4 gig of RAM. Yeah, that's fine. I'm going to keep it at that. I'm just going to change the base folder to use the C drive. Well, the root of the C drive. And I'm going to change this machine base to do the same. That's just a preference. You don't have to do that last bit, but I just find it easier to keep them all there. I know where they are. And then you click import. That's going to take a couple of minutes. So here's what I prepared earlier. This is it. It imported all there. There's actually the view that you normally get if you just install VirtualBox is this view here. You can see all the information that pertains to that VM here, and you can see that it's set to 40 gig. Now, the VMs that you download from Microsoft are 40 gig in size, which is a bit small, and you'll soon run out of space when you come to package things. So what you need to do is you need to increase that disk space. So what you need to do is you need to go into File and Virtual Media Manager. Now I know it's I just know it's this one because these have got snapshots against them, and you can see it's set to 40 gig. So just to increase the size of the disk, you can either use a slider or you can just type it in. So I want that to be 200 gigabytes and click apply. and that's then changed the size of the VDI. I think we'll change to 200 gig. Just double check that. That's yeah, 200 gig. Now there's a couple of other settings that I want to change. So I'm going to go into the settings button, and I'm going to configure the VM how I want it to be. So I'm going to go into General and Advanced, and I'm going to enable the shared clipboard and the drag and drop. Then these are reliant on the guest additions that I mentioned earlier. As you can see, when you hover over it, it says that it needs the guest additions to be installed in the guest OS, and I'm going to show you that afterwards. But I'm going to select bidirectional and bidirectional. You've got all the settings here. You can change the amount of memory, you can change the number of processors. You can play around with this as much as you want to, but this is just how I set up my machines. I'm going to enable 3D acceleration, and I'm going to increase the video memory to maximum. I'm going to storage. Now the guest additions that I keep going on about, when you come to install them in the guest OS, so in Windows, it'll actually insert as a CD, like a CD drive, like puts the optical media into a CD drive. So I need that by default. This hasn't actually got a CD drive, so I need to add an optical drive. To do that, I just click the icon that looks like a CD with a little plus sign next to it, and I get a question, and I just want to leave it empty for now. And there you go. I've got a CD drive that's empty on that same IDE controller. Audio, if you want to enable audio, go ahead and enable audio. Network, serial port, I'm not going to mess around with any of those. USB, I'm going to enable USB so that if I plug a USB stick or dongle or something into my machine, I can access it from my VM. I'm not going to mess around with the settings. You can do if you want to, but I'll just leave it as default. The other important thing that you need to do is shared folders. Now, a shared folder is important because it's a folder that can be seen by both the host machine and the VM machine. So you stick all your installers into that folder from your host machine, and then you can access them easily from your VM. And the same thing when you cloudify, you can put your STPs into that shared folder, and you can see them from your host machine and then move them wherever you need to. So I'm just going to add a VM. I've got a second drive in this machine, so I'm just going to share my D drive, and I'm just going to auto mount it, and that's all I'm going to do. Now, if those eagle eyes among you have noticed, I've got this thing at the bottom that says invalid settings detected. If I hover over it, it actually tells me what those invalid settings are. And in this case, it's saying I've got remote display enabled. And it won't work unless I install this extension pack they keep going on about. Well, I don't need that option anyway. I don't even know what it does. I'm just going to go into display and into remote display, and I'm going to uncheck that. And as I do that, the invalid settings disappear. So it's quite clever. If you've got any invalid settings, like if you've enabled too much memory or too many processors or whatever, it'll tell you, and you can amend it, adjust it appropriately. But that's my VM setup. So the next stage is to actually launch the VM. So to do that, I'm just going to click Start, and my VM will start opening up. Now, like I said, these VMs are from Microsoft. I mean, there's nothing to stop you from creating your own VM and installing Windows and everything else. It's just that these have already got Windows installed, and it just makes like, if this, you need to see this as like a quick setup guide. So this is the quickest way that we could think of getting you set up and packaging straight away. So that's why we're using these VMs. So like I said, by default, you've got this IE user account, and the password is capital P ASSW0RD exclamation mark. Like I said, feel free to add another administrator account and have your own password. That's actually what we do, but you don't need to do it as far as this demo is concerned. Right, so then we're into Windows. First thing I want to do is I want to install the guest editions. So to add that extra functionality for copy and paste and everything. Like I said, you don't need to worry about this installing C++ because it doesn't. To do that, you go into the devices menu at the top, which is the VMware menu, sorry, the Oracle VirtualBox menu. So you go to devices, insert the guest edition CD image, which basically is the same as putting a CD in a CD drive. I'm just going to click that so that I get the choose what to do with it, and I'm going to run the VBox editions, VM VirtualBox guest editions. I'm going to accept the UAC prompt, and then you get just a wizard. And again, it's just a quick. I'm not going to change any of the default settings. I'm just clicking next, 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 and this will require a reboot. But it installs reasonably quickly. There we go, and there we go. So other things that you need to do, so when this comes back up, other things that you'd want to do are maybe change the regional settings. As I said, this is a Microsoft VM, so the region settings are set to North America with US keyboards. So obviously over in the UK, we'd need to change that to UK date and time and UK keyboard and everything. But I'm not going to go through that with you guys. You guys surely know will already know how to do that. So, but now if I maximize the screen, hopefully this will resize. There we go. Bit of a delay. That's a bit bigger. It's a horrible background, so I'll change the background as well. But that's what you get by default. Now, if you remember earlier, I changed the sizes of the disk to 200 gig. Now that changed the size of the VM, but it didn't change the size of the Windows partition. So obviously I need to go into disk management and then increase the size of this 40 gig Windows partition to make use of this extra 160 gig of unallocated space. So that, as I'm sure you already know, just right click the Windows partition, click extend volume, you get the extend volume wizard. By default, it just eats up the whole of the unallocated space, which I'm happy with. Click next again, click finished, and there you go. I've got a 200 gig C drive. And the VBox edition is still actually in there, but that's okay. I'm just going to close that now. Now, other things you'd want to do, like I said, you want to change, maybe amend the regional settings for your time and location. You'd also want to update Windows as much as possible. So I'd get Windows as up to date, including all the reboots that you need to do. But for now, I'm just going to carry on and configure this and get it ready. So I'm going to go to this PC. You can see my shared folder there. It's automatically come across. So now I can see this D drive, my D drive on my host machine is now mapped to my as a shared folder in this VM. And I'm looking for the Cloud Paging Studio and the Software 2 packaging tool. I'm just dragging those to the desktop. That's it. I'm just going to install Cloud Paging Studio. This is the latest version, again, downloaded from our forums from this location here, Cloud Paging 9.3, and it's the latest version that's available at the moment is Cloud Paging Studio 9.2.0. I think 9.2.2 is imminent. I think it's already been released. It's just going through last minute testing with us, but it hasn't actually been released to our customers yet. But yeah, there we go. So yeah, I'm just going to install this. Again, default settings, next, next, accept the EULA, next, next, and install. takes seconds, and there we go. Cloud Paging Studio is now installed. Now, you don't think you can start packaging yet, because again, we've got to use this Software 2 packaging tool. This is the latest version at the minute that's available on here. I know Umaze does update this quite regularly, so it's always worth checking back on the forums when there's a new version, if there's a newer version out there. You have to run it as admin, like I've just done. And like we said, you've got all these different options. I'm going to just select all. I'm going to uncheck Disable UAC, as Umaze mentioned, and I'm going to click Apply Changes. Are you sure you want to? Yes, I am sure I want to. So, something else to mention, I'll talk about some of these options while it's doing this, because it takes a few minutes. So, some things on this are to disable things that are background processes like Windows Defender and Windows Update and Microsoft Store updates, and some things are slightly more not useful, because you need to disable those things, but you've got other useful things like some system settings. So it's useful when you're packaging to be able to see hidden files and folders, and to see the file extensions of applications and files, so you can see what they are straight away. Also, one of my little pet peeves is that Microsoft decided when you open Windows Explorer, you get the quick launch stuff, or the things that I'm not sure. I just want, when I open Windows Explorer, I want to see my drives, I want to see my PC. So this tool will automatically do that as well. It's also enabling .NET 3.5 for me. So all this good stuff. If you want to see in detail what's going on, well, I can't do it now because I've already started, but if you go into options, there's an option so you can see it opens the what's the word I'm looking for, Umaze? I can't remember. It actually shows you all the commands as they're being run.
Sorry, I was on mute. It showed the console.
The console, that's it. Sorry, yeah, the console. So my mind went blank. So it shows the console. So it shows everything that's being set. So that's sometimes useful to look at as well. But yeah, now .NET Framework, I'll mention. We obviously, Software 2 recommend that you don't package .NET Framework. That's why we're installing 3.5 now. Yeah. It's just going through, as you can see, it's turning off the firewall settings. So Windows is probably need to turn it on. But .NET Framework, when I was still at I used to work at a university myself, and I used to package there. I packaged Visual Studio, and Visual Studio needed a newer version of .NET Framework than the one we had on our image. So I packaged it with it, and it worked. It was great. It was fine. We pushed it out to the academic, and then it was working fine. And then the academic noticed. I'm just going to restart this while this asks. The academic noticed that there was they got update prompts. So academic did what they were supposed to do, and they installed the updates and rebooted when they were asked to, and then the machine rebooted and came back up. But then the machine was telling the academic that there was updates to install, and he ended up in this vicious cycle where there was constantly updates that need to be installed. Well, obviously that's the case because you can't update virtual files, which is why we say don't package .NET Framework. .NET Framework 3.5, however, is still needed by some applications. I think SolidWorks included. So it's still necessary to have that turned on. I'm sure all you guys have got it turned on in your environments. What you need to think about is BYOD. So on students' personal devices, have they already got it turned on? So maybe as part of the sign-up process to sign up for AppsAnywhere at your various institutions, maybe you include the fact that they need to turn excuse me, .NET Framework 3.5 on. and give them information on how to do that. Right then, so this machine is virtually ready now to start packaging on. What else am I going to do to this? Well, little things that I like to add is I like Notepad to be attached to the taskbar, just because it makes it easier to quickly type in an app event if I need to do one in batch or whatever. I'm just typing into Notepad there. And little things like that. I'll see the thing that I do. But there we go, for all intents and purposes. Oh, the other thing that you might want to do before you do anything else is this cleanup. I mean, I haven't got this fully up to date, because obviously that takes a few minutes and you don't want to sit around while the machine does Windows updates. Who wants to do that? Normally if you do the Windows update thing, there'll be like about 3 gig of Windows update files that can be removed from the system. So it's worth just running disk cleanup before you take your master snapshot. I'm not going to bother doing that for this demonstration, but I'm just letting you guys know this. So this machine is now ready to package on. I can't start packaging yet because I haven't taken my snapshot. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to shut down my VM. I just think it's good practice to shut down the VM before you take the master snapshot, and then I'm going to take. So at the minute, this is it. I just need to change my view so I can see snapshots. As you can see, there's no snapshots there at the minute, so I'm going to take one. I'm going to call it Windows 10 64-bit Studio 9.2.0. And I'm just going to put today's date in here, 18th of June 2020. Okay, there we go. So now I've got a snapshot. I can start packing. I can roll back to a clean state if I need to. And that was done in what, less than half an hour. I know I didn't do updates or anything else, but you guys can see how quick it is to potentially set up your packaging environment using a pre-configured VM from Microsoft and the Software 2 packaging tool. It's really quick. Okay, so where does that leave us? That was a packaging demonstration. Like I said, all the information is on the forums in this article. And then the last thing to talk about is the packaging process. What do you do when you get confronted with an application you've never used before? Well, the same thing as we do. We get a packaging request. We then do some discovery on it. What's discovery? Discovery means that we install the software, we license it, we see how it works. I actually do this on my packaging machine, so in my packaging VM. So it's actually easier to see. You're never going to use that packaging that app set that you've got there. In fact, you won't ever cloudify it. You'll revert back to a clean state and then start packaging it with the plan that you've got in mind. But the things you're looking out for with discovery is you'll see if there's any C++ redistributables. You're making a note of the versions of those C++ redistributables so you can find the installers for them for the correct versions so that you can install those first at layer 4. You'll see if there's any SQL parts to the application, because if there is, you want to bear that in mind, because some of those C++ you might need to install physically. You're looking to see if there's any drivers that get installed, because you need to run an app event to install drivers. Now, if you're lucky, the application may actually have a driver package application saved somewhere in its file structure. So if it has, you can just have an app event that runs that executable after virtualization, if you can find a way to run it silently. Or there might be, or failing that, there might just be .inf files within the app set that you can use pnp-util or dp install, another method to install using an app event again. Yeah, I think that's everything. So yes, once you've got your plan on how you want to proceed, then you go ahead and start packaging. If you've got your C++, you've already got them ready, so you'll install those at layer 4 before you move on to then capturing the main install. You'll then capture the main install. If you've got services, you may need to set them to layer 2. If you've got drivers, you'll need to do an app event. You'll also be checking, part of discovery, you'll be checking to see if there's any firewall settings that need to be applied. All this sort of stuff. So you go ahead and package it with that in mind, but then don't forget that as part of packaging, you're also testing. So you do your packager testing, and that can be twofold. So I've just gone through packaging, setting up a packaging VM. You also need to set up a test VM, which is very similar. So it'll have windows, and you'll have instead of the studio, you'll have the player, and then you can use the software to packaging tool to enable those extended permissions, or you set them up manually. And you'll see if the application works in that environment, in that clean Windows environment. If it works correctly, then great, you've got it working. Then you'll test it again in an environment that's closer to your lab environment, maybe, because you might have redirected folders that you need to adjust for. Obviously, if they're redirected folders, you need to set those any folders that get redirected to layer 2 in your app set, or layer 1 in your app set. Layer 1 or layer 2, if there's something in those folders. Once it's passed that testing, then it gets passed on to QA, quality assurance. What's QA? Well, it could just be a colleague that just gives it a second look over, see if make sure you've excluded everything that needs excluding, you haven't forgotten something silly. Just gives it once over and make sure it works again. So then if they're happy with it, gets passed through UAT, user acceptance testing. That's normally the person who requested the app set in the first place. So it could be the academic in your cases. And they'll test it to see if it works and does everything that it's supposed to do. And hopefully then they'll sign it off. If at any point during any of that process, something doesn't work, or it gets passed back to the discovery phase, because you need to find out how that application, how to fix that application. Once you've found out how to fix it, then you go back to packaging and you apply the fix into packaging, and then you test it again, QA it again, and then the end user tests it, and then it gets signed off again. Okay, and with that, I think we're done. So if you guys have got any questions.
Fantastic, Phil. Thank you very much, and thanks very much again, Umays, for showing us that packaging tool as well. Yeah, there's a few questions that have come in. Let me just have a quick look through them. So yeah, a question here is there any documentation, Phil, on how to add a C++ redistributable as a prerequisite for a local install for BYOD?
No, there isn't at the minute. It should be straightforward. You just need to have the installers in a package, and then use an app event or something to trigger the install silently. We could, if somebody wants, we could write an article on that, I suppose. It's probably a good idea, actually. Yeah, leave that with me, and I'll make a note, and maybe that's something we can we could put together for them.
The questions, the two questions here from Ian, they're going to be saved anyway. So because they're quite long questions, we haven't got much time. What we'll do is I'll pass them over to Phil and Umays, and we'll get some answers sent over to you probably early time next week.
There is an article that I did publish a little while back for creating just a dependency app set that we can use for applications, especially for BYOD. We can deploy this dependency. It just contains the C++ redistributables. So we can deploy that as a dependency for BYOD only app sets, or you can use it with all the app sets actually. So if you just do a search for C++ on our library, it's the third article down, and I have actually gave a little recipe for how to actually configure this app set. Hopefully that answers your question. If not, obviously feel free to send us another one, and we'll do our best to answer it to as best as we can.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Amaze. Yeah, as I mentioned, there's a few larger questions here that we're probably not going to have time to get to right now, but as I said, all the questions are saved, and we're going to follow up on at a later date. So thank you very much, Amaze. Thanks very much, Phil. Really interesting workshop, and I'm sure everyone found it extremely helpful. And thank you very much for everyone who joined us as well for this workshop. And at 5 o'clock, I believe there's a product update from Ryan as well. So hopefully you can join us for that one as well. Thank you very much, everyone. And I'll speak to you all soon.
Thanks.
Cheers, Phil. Cheers, Amaze.
Bye.